What is going on, everybody? Today we are doing a 4-round Superflex rookie mock draft, and I have another great guest today from the Dynasty space. I am joined by Jeremy Popielarz at Popes FFH on X and a Dynasty and rookie analyst over at FTN Fantasy. So make sure to check him out and look at all of his amazing rookie content because he does some absolutely amazing work. We're going to be drafting from 2 draft slots today, from the 1.02 and the 1.08, putting ourselves into Jeremy's mind to understand his process and analysis on some rookies to see how he would attack a rookie draft from these spots. So without further ado, let's get right into the mock. All right, Jeremy, we're starting off at the 1.02. Of course, the 101 was none other than Ashton Genty. So you have basically your pick of the board here. This is probably going to be a pretty popular conversation for a lot of guys at the 102 if you're going between running back, wide receiver, or quarterback in this super flex mock. But where would you lean at the 1.02 here?
Yeah, so for me, it is really a question of really a receiver and a quarterback here. And I feel like until we get that hard pressed landing spots for some of these players, it is still in the air. I still lean to Tet McMillan. I do believe still in the profile that he's given us as a production player goes. I know the 40 wasn't probably as fast as most people had hoped for, but still solid for a guy that stands 6'4". And he does have question marks, obviously, but coming out of Arizona, back-to-back seasons of over 1,300 receiving yards, topped 8 touchdowns in both of the last 2 seasons, really has proven a fluidity to his game for a bigger player that makes him a little bit unique. We've seen those comps to like the Drake London type of profile. Some people have mentioned Mike Evans, and I can see that to it. He doesn't have Mike Evans' physicality. He will need to get there for sure. I like the Drake London, Quentin Johnston type of mold, and I know Quentin Johnston may scare some people off, but as a prospect, Quentin Johnston was pretty alluring for many people. A bigger guy that has that ability after the catch to make some players miss. And really, where the differentiation between Johnston and McMillan come for me is at the catch point. McMillan's a little bit better as far as the catch point goes, just his overall technique and his more natural ferocity to kind of go get the football. He does this very well. He has the very good, strong hands. We've seen plenty of one-handed, stellar type of highlight reel catches that he then also adds on 10, 15 yards of yak. So there's really just a next level to him, I think, and he still hasn't reached that next level. So you're banking on an upside that is still to be untapped, but I do think in a little bit of a more rigid regime in the NFL levels, I think he can develop his route tree a little bit more. He's a solid route runner, but could use a little bit more of a quickness coming out of breaks. So I think with all of that being said, there's just an upside for him that the rest of the receiver class doesn't have. So I think there's some safety as well. And what we'll get, he's probably going to land into a spot that could also feed a lot of targets. And typically just the 1-2, I lean towards positions that are a little bit longer shelf lives. Most of the teams at 1-2, if it is their pick, have a long way to go. So I avoid the running back position at the beginning of drafts a little bit more if there's not a player like Ashton Genty or Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley on the board.
Interesting. So I love the pick with Tet McMillan. I kind of have a 2-part question for you on this pick. One is, I feel like the popular pick that's becoming the case, especially after the combine, is Omarion Hampton, since it seems like the combine has now solidified him into being a first-round NFL draft pick. And he himself, I personally feel like, is a lot closer to Ashton Genty than he is Travion or Judkins or Caleb Johnson, the 3 guys kind of behind him. That's just my personal opinion, but I know a lot of other people kind of share that sentiment. And he, I think, has become the consensus 102, or at least in the DLF YouTube comments, has become the consensus 102. So you kind of hinted on in terms of, you want to take wide receiver over running back, especially if you are the team that deservedly got the 1.02. But you don't view Hampton in that kind of same light as you would Tet McMillan as your rookie wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so I just think the receiver class dries up really quick too. So it's a little bit of taking in that aspect of it. Like, yes, Hampton is closer. He's kind of in his own tier. He's not really Ashton Genty level at this point of his career, but he's also better than the rest of that group in Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, etc. So for me, I feel like there's a pretty significant gap between Tet McMillan and then kind of the guys after him for upside. As prospects, Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, those guys are pretty close, but those guys don't offer the true like X type of ceiling that Tet McMillan can give you. Like if McMillan hits, like he's not going to be Julio Jones, but like, we had that talk with Quentin Johnston just a short time ago, as far as like, if this guy hits, there's a lot to be given here. So I still think that that's where I am with Tet McMillan, as well as I think the running back class, although deep and very solid, I think that that's the key term there, is that they're solid. Like there isn't a Bijan Robinson. You're not going to get a, Saquon Barkley out of this class. You're going to get a plethora of quality starters at the NFL level, but none that are true workhorses, in my opinion. Hampton probably could get there, but Hampton also has a little quirks to his game as well that could find him splitting touches. We're also seeing that at the NFL level, and that's not always the worst knack anymore, because we see that with split touches. Look at Bucky Irving last year. Like we're seeing this split touch type of role generate plenty of fantasy production. But when we're talking about a guy that could see 140 targets versus a guy that might see 150 carries, like it's just tough to me to say that this running back class is generational as far as like each player individually. It's a generational class in the fact that they're just super deep. Like rounds 3, 4, and 5 in your rookie drafts, you might as well just take a running back. Like they would be second rounders all day in most of these other classes we've had in the past few years.
The last thing that it was kind of the second part that I didn't get to of this question is I've seen similar to Omar and Hampton kind of rising to be in the 102. Cam Ward's just kind of stayed where he's at 103. Mm-hmm. But I've seen people, starting to push Tet down to, he's my personal 1.04 behind Hampton and Ward. But I've seen other people, pushing down to like 105, 106. They're saying, hey, maybe Tyler Warren should be up there, Colston Loveland. You still maybe have Shador up there, another running back or two up there. And I don't know if it is because of Tet himself or if he's being dragged down by the overall weakness of this class in terms of wide receiver class. I don't really know what it is that's dragging him down. So you drafting him here at the 1.02, I love seeing that because I feel like I've been trying to push back on, people have been asking me, is Tet even the wide receiver one in this class? Is he as good as we actually think? I think that he is. And by extension, I feel like you as well, based on you drafting him at the 102.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of his game isn't flashy. Like it's not like it is in a way, but it's not, at this point of the drafts and the draft cycle, you start to see you're getting all-star games. You're getting the Reese's Senior Bowl. You're getting the combine, and the players that kind of start to rise draft boards are the quick separators, the quick twitch athletes, the over athletic type of players, but those aren't always the best football players when it comes down to it. McMillan really lives in like a leverage type of territory, a long strider. He's not going to be the fastest guy. I wasn't surprised he didn't run a 4.3. Like, I mean, it wasn't gonna. The tape showed you he wasn't that fast, but he understands his leverage points. He understands how to manipulate defenders. And so it looks easy and it doesn't look that hard for him. So sometimes those players get overlooked because simply it just looks better when you put him incredible juke move on a defender and then go for 10 yards than it does if you just like easily stride for 10 yards. Like it just does. It looks better. So unless you're really keyed in on it, and I think that there's been some people that have also mentioned like I've been pushes. I've seen it all over X as well, like where people are pushing Tet McMillan down or they're saying, is he really as good as we think he is? And my thing would be, he may not be as good as we're boosting him to be, but I do think he's still the 101. I think that there are definitely areas for improvement in his game, 100%. But it can be said for the rest of this class. And for me, I just don't believe the tight ends should be that high. I think Tyler Warren has a lot of improvement to be had as well. I think Tyler Warren's hype is a little bit high. I wouldn't argue Shador being up here. Like, I get it. It's quarterbacks, super flex. Like, take him while you got it because this is the cheapest they're going to be. Having some bitty hits, like, gold mine. So I can understand that. But yeah, I'm still in on McMillan. I think that he rightfully deserves it. It's really kind of a 3-man tier. I like Egbuka, I like Bird, and I just want to see kind of what the NFL has to say for it. But I think from the pro day and everything that we've seen and his tape just speaks volumes to the point where he deserves to still be the top guy in this class.
All right, let's move on from Tet McMillan. We talked about him way too much. We are up again at the 1.08. Cam Ward, Amarian Hampton, Travion Henderson, Tyler Warren, Luther Burden have all gone off the board. So we're staring down, Egbuka's still there. Travis Hunter's still there at the wide receiver position. You got Colston Loveland as the tight end 2, Shador as the quarterback 2, Judkins and Caleb Johnson kind of round out the top 5 for this rookie running back class. But where are you looking to go at the 1.08 here?
Yeah, with how it came out throughout this board, my wide receiver 2A, we kind of talked about a little bit with Tet McMillan there, is Emeka Egbuka. So he's still here. I'm going to ride that out. Another player that I would say athletically we weren't overly in love with. He isn't really the most freakish type of athlete, but he did finish his Ohio State career with the Ohio State record for receptions at 205. So he's a guy who can get open, plain and simple. That's what Emeka Egbuka does. Very similar to what the JSN role was at Ohio State prior to him elevating to the NFL. He's a guy that it's a pretty stout frame. He's a physical player. He will block for you. He's put up 2,000-yard seasons at Ohio State, 2 seasons with 10 touchdowns. So we know that the production is there and the semi-high ceiling is there. Is he a wide receiver 1 for us in fantasy? Unlikely, unless he ends up in like the Amon-Ra St. Brown role somewhere. However, I don't know if there's that role available in many places currently in the NFL. You could have some for sure, and we can argue that, like the Raiders or I'm trying to think here who doesn't really have an establishment. Maybe Green Bay, maybe the Patriots. Yeah, like there's 3 teams that, they have plenty of targets, but like, are they as good as the Lions? Like Amon-Ra St. Brown locked into like Jared Goff playing some good football, some really good offensive play calling. And not that Amon-Ra is going to be bad moving forward, but just saying it was a very good, perfect storm for him. And I don't know if Egbuka will get that depending where he falls. So we'll have to see how that goes. But at worst, he's going to be that JSN type of, a little bit slow start, but look to probably build in year 2. And he's a guy that's just a real true zone beater and an underneath kind of savant in a way. So it's very good with the way the NFL has moved to kind of the 2 high safety shells and avoiding the big plays. This is going to be great for Emeka Egbuka, especially in PPR formats. He's going to be a guy that you really want to get involved in. Getting him here at 8 with the vacuum of not knowing a landing spot, I'm all in on it. Like I said, I probably would have taken him up at 4 or 5, to be honest. So
yeah, I'm glad that you brought up that you also don't probably view him as like an NFL wide receiver 1 unless he finds that perfect, exact Amon-Ra role, the Keenan Allen role, whatever it is, because he never was that at Ohio State. And I think that's one of the things that really kills him in my like modeling kind of system. But his PFF stuff looks phenomenal. Like when you look at what he's done in terms of yards per route run, targets per route run, first down per route run, all that kind of stuff, he is phenomenal. It's just the seasonal stats aren't there just because he played behind, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jeremiah Smith. So I'm glad that you brought out that he probably doesn't project to be an NFL wide receiver 1, because if he wasn't that at Ohio State behind a multitude of actual NFL wide receiver 1s just on the same team in college, I'm glad that you brought that up because I feel the same way. But I feel like some people might say, well, why would I take an NFL wide receiver 2 in, the first round if he doesn't project to have that kind of ceiling? Like you could take Travis Hunter and he might honestly be the best wide receiver in this entire class if he plays 100% wide receiver snaps. Why would you take Egbuka above Judkins or Caleb Johnson if they could potentially be, 250, 300 touch running back workhorses in the NFL in the right landing spot? Does any of that play into it for you, or you're just, Egbuka really good, doesn't matter, take him?
When it comes down to it, we have to look at fantasy as a whole too. Now, yes, you want to take the best available player on the board. I know that's a very common process for people. And yes, you don't want to just completely draft somebody out of the blue to fill a need. However, Emeka Egbuka if he's even more likely a wide receiver too. Like, we tend to start 3 receivers in most fantasy formats, 2 flexes, and receivers are a little bit more reliable sometimes in those PPR type of formats. Like, he could easily be a guy that sees 8 targets a game. Like, I'll take 8 targets a game. He's going to produce very good production off of that. And we don't know what Quinshon Judkins is going to be. We don't know what Caleb Johnson is. For receivers, the NFL tells you a pretty good amount of like, hey, they're drafted. This is, as long as they can produce, they're going to get the opportunity. There's not many places you're going to get 250 touches in the NFL as a running back. It's just not going to happen. And you're not going to get that out of this class. I can tell you right now, I would be very highly suspect to think you're going to get 4 even that are going to see 250 touches, just because the game has gone away from that. Like, Bijan Robinson has struggled to get that, and he would be still the running back 1 in this class. Like, there's good players, like we alluded to earlier, like, they're good. They're quality NFL players. Are they going to get touches and opportunities? Yes. But to me, that's very much a lateral move to Emeka Egbuka in a positional need that I have to start 3 and could start 5. Like, in PPR formats, the receivers, especially the role he's going to have, is a little bit more valuable than, say, Quinshon Judkins, who may be the 2-down grinder for the New England Patriots. Like, yeah, okay, maybe he gets some workload in the passing game, but not enough to counter the fact that I might have Emeka Egbuka as the wide receiver 2 in, I don't know, let's think here, like Tampa Bay. Like, you know, I would take that. I know Godwin's back, but like, just a more of a high volume passing attack I should refer to. Well, actually, Jacksonville. We'll go a little bit more or less into Florida. You know, Emeka Egbuka alongside Brian Thomas Jr., I'm taking that all day over, say, Quinshon Judkins, even if he lands with the Raiders. Like, who knows that they don't, you know, bring somebody else in. Chip Kelly was perfectly fine with going Judkins and Henderson, who says they don't draft 2 running backs in this class, and it's Judkins splitting with Woody Marks, and Marks is taking all the passing work. Like, we don't know as it sits really today. And I just think that the Egbuka as a wide receiver 2 is still giving you plenty of fantasy numbers when you're basically just saying and assuming that Quinshon Judkins is going to get enough touches to be a running back 1, which I don't think is going to happen.
All right, moving on here. We're up again at the 2.02. You drafted Tet McMillan with the first round pick here. With this second round pick, you know, we're looking at Jaxson Dart as the QB3, or Jalen Milroe is there after his like sub 4.5 40-yard dash at the pro day. Trey Harris, Matthew Golden, Devin Neal, Isaiah Bond, just reading the, you know, off the top names from sleeper ADP here. But what are we looking at? We already drafted Tet, like I said. Who are you adding to this squad?
This works out perfectly, to be honest, if I was the one too. Especially in Superflex, Jaxson Dart is still here. You mentioned his name there as the quarterback 3 coming off the board. Some people definitely have him as the quarterback 1. So I would take Jaxson Dart. I do think that it is a weaker quarterback class for sure. So the issue that comes with Jaxson Dart for me isn't necessarily what we've seen as a passer in, say, a clean pocket, or the system has really benefited him. We've seen a continuous improvement from him. These RPOs, the shotgun type of snaps, is really where he sits and breeds and is very good. When everything's in rhythm, he can hit his back of his drop, get the football out. He has everything you want. He has a quick release. He has fluid upper body mechanics. The issue is that sometimes we do see a disjointment from the upper body and the lower body. This really comes when he feels a need to get rid of the ball quicker than expected. So a la under pressure. We see it at times. It's not prevalent to the point where it's like, oh my God, he can't play at the NFL level. But I do think there'll be needs to be improvement. His completion percentage, obviously over 69% this past season, hit 4,200 or more passing yards, hit 29 touchdowns. So we're seeing a guy that can be a fairly prolific passer. We do see him kind of struggle in the deeper portions of the field. We see him underthrow the ball a little bit, and all this really starts to stem from those lower body mechanics. At times, he kind of just heaves it, doesn't really step through the football. So this is stuff that could be coached out. We've seen it. And his completion percentage isn't into that scary territory of the Josh Allens, the Anthony Richardsons, etc. So with the right coaching, I do think that Dart can continue this ascension that we've seen year after year under the Ole Miss tutelage. But I will say that I do worry a little bit. Just have those question marks around that. Is it the mechanics cleanable? Can he kind of continue to operate in rhythm at the NFL level? Think of like the Tua Tagovailoas, like when Tua's rolling in that Miami offense off the RPO, gets the ball out quickly and hits his players in stride, it looks great. But when he's asked to do a little bit extra on his end, avoid some pressure, get a little creative, Dart has shown a little bit better ability, I think, than Tua will say, because we've seen that. He has over 1,500 rushing yards in his career at the collegiate level, which is also impressive because you have to remember the collegiate level, they take minus away for your sacks. So like this is 1,500 plus probably because he's definitely been sacked more than once. So he's had a good ability on the ground, which I think the NFL will also use. This is that Bo Nix argument, whether he can completely elevate his game or is he just going to be a mid-level quarterback, which is not the end of the world. Like, I mean, I don't need him to be Josh Allen. You're getting him in the second round here. Like, if I got Bo Nix, like, I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? He offers you a little bit of that upside of the Bo Nix, the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, can make a couple plays with his feet. If the play breaks down, he's really not going to be winning a rushing crown anytime soon. But that's a little bit of help there as far as buoying his fantasy value. And again, it just comes down to the ability to make that jump in the pro levels. And then if that's going to give him a longer career, but I do think he's going to get that opportunity. I know you had mentioned it, potentially a future Pittsburgh Steeler, which I could see. And I hopefully works out better than Kenny Pickett, which I think he would. But either way, I do think that Jaxson Dart has some good traits going towards the NFL level. And I think that at this point in the draft, I'm willing to take that risk. And you alluded to Jalen Milroe. I'm not going there. I'm typically, when it comes to my process, I shy away from the unrefined passers, a la Anthony Richardson, even Josh Allen. Like, I didn't love Josh Allen coming out. I'm a Bills fan, and they drafted him, and I was like, I was wrong, obviously, as along with like everybody in the NFL. So either way, I tend to shy away and be a little lenient towards those players because I think that the passing part of the game is the hardest to overcome at the NFL level. So again, I'm just not as in on Milroe as other people. I know the physical traits are there, but we saw that with Anthony Richardson. We saw it with Trey Lance. Like, it doesn't always mesh.
Maybe you should. Well, I don't actually know what your quarterback rankings are. Dart is actually my QB2. I have him above Shador. So maybe you need to talk me off of that ledge. But I actually believe that Dart is more translatable to the NFL level than Shador is. And, you know, especially if he ends up falling a little bit more like Shador, if he still ends up being some sort of a top 10, 12, 15 pick, the situation may or may not be fantastic for him. But if Dart, you know, falls to like that kind of later first, and does go to Pittsburgh, you know, I think he's going to have organizational stability. He'll have DK Metcalf. He'll have Pickens maybe for a year or half a year if it's rumored that he's going to be traded this year. But I still just feel like Dart might be a little safer situationally, but I think also is a more translatable quarterback than Shador is. Am I wrong on that? Or
I think they both can translate. I think the upside's more potentially with Dart. The issue for Shador Sanders is going to be, is he semi-broken at this point? And I say that in not like basically the tendency to bail from the pocket due to poor offensive line play for most of his collegiate career has hurt him a little bit as far as when you watch the tape, like he bails early a little bit and he doesn't have the strongest arm, but I also don't think Dart does either. Dart has good velocity, but again, I've seen plenty of underthrown footballs from Jaxson Dart. So I do think Dart has maybe a slightly stronger arm, but they're really similar players when it comes down to it. I think Dart's just more athletic, really. Sanders isn't really going to run with the football. We've seen that. So he makes a little bit more of riskier throws or just throws it away. I do think that Sanders games can translate. And like I said, it comes down to that, you know, old adage of like Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. Like is he going to be a little bit broken if he doesn't end up with a good offensive line at the NFL level? Like, is he going to have those same tendencies? And those tendencies you can overcome at the collegiate level, but at the NFL level, like if you can't break that, that's a struggle, especially in a day of where they don't really let quarterbacks develop. It's kind of, you got to do what you got to do now to keep that place. So I can see the worry. I think they're really close, honestly. I think Sanders and Dart are the two A, B, and it really comes down to where they go. Like you said, a little bit of that situational type of play. And what the NFL says, quarterbacks, for me, a lot of it goes into draft capital, just because most of the position is between the ears and we aren't privy to that information as fantasy analysts. Like, we don't get to go and have a one-on-one conversation with these players. So we do have to kind of trust some of the NFL front offices that actually sit down and talk to them and say, I think I can make this guy work, So I do think both are landing spot dependent in a way of how they play. I think if you get Jaxson Dart out of an RPO offense and you put him under center, it's going to be a bad day. I just truthfully do. I don't know if he'll be able to translate that well. Shador, I think, can play under center, can kind of be a little bit more versatile in that way. But again, Sanders has his own tendencies of battling and, not having the strongest arm, which we've seen. So there's both some issues there, but you saying he's 2, I'm fine with it. They're my 2 and 3 as well. Just reversed. It's Sanders over Dart. So,
all right, Jeremy, moving on at the 2.08 here. Again, you already took Egbuka. So now we're kind of staring down the barrel of, some other wide receivers like Jalen Royals is there, Jayden Higgins, Elic A, that I still don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've heard people say it multiple times, but it just is not a word that I can actually physically say. So his name's Elic. Dylan Sampson, Cam Scadaboo are there. A couple other running backs, Harold Fannin at the tight end position. But where are we looking at with a 2.08 to pair with Egbuka?
Yeah, so I'm going to keep going on this receiver class. I know a lot of people are down on it, but I do think there are some quality players here, especially for today's NFL. And much like Egbuka in the first round for the same team, I'm going to go with another kind of elite separator underneath type of player that's going to kind of thrive against the dreaded cover 2 here at the NFL level in Jaylin Noel. A little bit speedy. He's going to be a riser for many of us. We're talking about it. I think I saw today too, Chris Sims has him in his top 5 that he released today for wide receiver position. But a guy that kind of hit the ground running from the beginning at Ohio State, 5'10", 180. So he's a little bit of a slender frame, but he is a very good route runner. Can basically make you look silly. No matter how good you are at defensive back, you also see him kind of moving on the inside. He can kind of play that Z where you get him in motion, get him moving, get some free releases. It's kind of going to be the death of the defender that has to try to cover him. We've seen it kind of continue to ascend the past 4 seasons at Iowa State, capping it off this past season, which over 1,100 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, and 80 receptions. Really, again, much like the Emeka Egbuka, he's going to be a PPR machine at the NFL level, and the NFL is trending towards these players. I know size is been kind of pushed upon of like, hey, we want these big elite type of receivers, but those players have kind of gone to the wayside. We just saw DK Metcalf get traded, like a pinnacle of kind of that big freakish X type of receiver. I know he was going to have to get paid. Seattle probably didn't want to with the trajectory of the team, but either direction, we don't see too many of those players continue to excel right now at the NFL level. We see teams starting to draft to like the Ricky Pearsalls, the Tank Dells, and see those guys kind of excel with the quick separation, the Amon-Ra St. Browns we talked about earlier, like those guys that can win underneath and then create a little after. And that's everything that Jaylin Noel excels at. So what I like about him is that ability and what should become a Z receiver at the NFL level, the ability to play inside and outside, although being slightly undersized. If he falls in that right position, say in Pittsburgh, alongside DK Metcalf and George Pickens, the right quarterback, right situation, I mean, we could see him definitely flourish in that type of mold. Still feels like a wide receiver 2 type of mold fantasy wise at his ceiling. I don't think he gets to the wide receiver 1s of like the Amon-Ra St. Browns, etc. But a wide receiver 2 for me in a position that we start 3 to 4, I'm fine taking that here, especially in the second round. The running backs are alluring for sure. But I still think there's some good upside in this receiver class right in this territory. Jaylin Noel being that here near the mid to late second, which I don't know if you'll get early May.
I'm glad that you took Noel here as well, because Matt in our first episode also took him. He took him at the 2.04 and also mentioned that he would not be shocked if he saw Noel's name being called on Thursday night in round 1 with the way that he's been kind of rising. I'm curious on if you feel the same way about him too, kind of like a Zay Flowersy kind of, rise.
Yeah, I would agree. If you really look at the back half of the first round, you're looking at teams that are in need of a separator. Houston at 25 needs that. Like Tank Dell, although on the roster, you're not going to get him for a season or so. They did just add Christian Kirk, so that kind of takes maybe a little bit away from it, but they could use someone like that. The Rams could potentially use someone. I know they just added Devontae Adams and have Puka Nacua, but Nacua is not the fastest player. They could use maybe the speed and the quick twitch of Jaylin Noel there. Doubt Baltimore goes with it. I doubt Detroit. Potentially Washington could be pairing with it. You got Debo now there, but Terry McLaurin isn't necessarily a slot guy. Debo Samuel will be interesting to see how they use him. Maybe he's their slot answer at the moment, so they may be out. But I really do like Houston, potentially Kansas City, but unlikely. Philadelphia, though, too, could also use a slot receiver. They tried to kind of supplement that with Jahan Dotson. But if he lands in Philadelphia, I wouldn't love it just because of how centralized their pass game is. It's a low-volume passing attack to begin with. So that would really kind of hurt him a little bit. For my opinion, but I really like Houston. I think Houston would be the perfect spot for him, mid to late there. And then honestly, the early second round too has some intriguing spots. Jacksonville, we talked about a little bit with Egbuka. Tennessee, I think, could use a slot type of receiver. The Giants could use that as well. So I think early day 2 is really the spot that I would like him to go. I think those landing spots are better if he gets past Houston. If he lands in Houston, love it. But the rest of those at the back half of day 1, don't love it. Even to my Bills, like it would be great for the NFL roster as well as Washington, Kansas City. Like it would be great. He's a good player. The issue would be is there's just not enough volume in those passing attacks to really warrant 2 or 3 true assets that we want to start fantasy weekly. So for me, it's Houston or bust in round 1 unless he goes really early, which I don't see happening. So that's where that early round 2 would really be ideal in like the Giants, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Raiders, New England. Like that's really the sweet spot for me.
All right, Jeremy, we're up again, 3.02. You've taken Tet, you've taken Jaxson Dart. We've kind of entered into there. I think there are still some good players here in this early third, but we have kind of entered this darty throw kind of area where, maybe ADP gets kind of thrown out the window. You just take some of your guys. So who are we looking at here at the 3.02?
Yeah, a guy that I still really like that would have been on par close to me there in the late second potentially is still available for me, and that is Jalen Royals out of Utah State. Another player similar to Tet McMillan, who I took in the first round for this position. The game's not super exciting. You watch it, it looks a little bit, not necessarily easy, but natural in a way for him and how it comes to him. He has a decent elusivity after the catch. It's not crazy good, but decent. And he creates good yards after the catch for a guy that's 5'11", 210. Like he's on a stout frame. He is on that shorter side, so it's not ideal. But I do think he's a player who could play X and Z at the NFL level. We talked about it a little bit with talking about Jaylin Noel, where the NFL is leaning towards these smaller sized receivers that separate quicker, can kind of get the ball in their hands and then let them do the work. And it's kind of like this trajectory that I feel like I've seen as far as like the quarterback play slowly going down a little. And then now the receivers need to be doing a little bit more at a league level. So I think they're looking towards, hey, if we can get a mid-level quarterback and get some good playmakers to surround them, get them the ball, that's going to help us. We see that with Jalen Royals' game. We've seen him take some screen passes to the house. We've seen him make just a couple guys miss and then just take off. We've seen the speed that's there for Jalen Royals. And it's someone that I think just goes under the radar at the moment due to a foot injury that he had this past season that really makes his numbers look not great on the surface level. If you didn't know he missed a portion of the games or why these games were missed, his 834 yards is a very good tick down from his 1,000 yards the season prior, and his 6 touchdowns is half of the 15 that he had the season prior. So it looks like kind of a fall off from a player who had a strong 2023, but it really was just a foot injury that caused him to miss a majority of the season. And we saw him at the Senior Bowl have a pretty solid week as well. So although he hasn't really risen up boards and you don't hear his name talked about a lot, I think that's a mistake. I do think that's still somewhere in here that he's going to find a home a little bit later in the draft now, maybe day 2, maybe early day 3, hopefully day 2, though. That gives him an opportunity to be potentially a Z receiver in most situations. My comps for him that I've kind of talked about is a little bit of like that Cooper Kupp, Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, where they're like a little physical. They're okay to get in the blocking game. They can kind of do a little bit after the catch, but they're undersized to an extent, but could still be your team's primary receiver. I think all of that range is in his realm. Now, is he going to hit Cooper Kupp numbers? Probably not, unless he maybe Rams with the Rams. But, you know, I think it's a guy that could be a little bit of a more late round player, much like Diggs and Cooper Kupp, that although they take a second or two, could end up being a very quality fantasy asset in the right situation. And I do think that that could happen because he will probably fall to those later rounds, and you'll be looking at teams that have a, you know, few later picks that they can maybe take a second to wait on the wide receiver position. You know, maybe the Chargers, the Chargers, him and McConkey would kind of clash, but the Pittsburgh Steelers we talked about earlier, maybe Cincinnati for an interior guy to pair with Higgins and Chase. Maybe Houston if they choose to forego earlier in the draft. Arizona could use somebody as well to pair with Harrison. New England is going to be a popular wide receiver position. Dallas, San Francisco, even if they wanted to replace kind of Deebo Samuel, maybe they kind of get away from the Swiss Army knife and they just add a player that's similar to Brandon Ayuk. Something to that category. Carolina will be a popular love spot for a receiver as well. So I think there's some spots. Vegas, keep himself close there to Utah, could also be a pretty good spot.
I like Jalen Royals a lot. He was a guy that I think he rose up my rankings personally. I think kind of post Senior Bowl, and then as you were kind of like diving into the class and you're looking at like initial, you know, analytics and all that kind of stuff, you're like, oh, who's this Jalen Royals guy? Oh, he did well at the Senior Bowl, and like I've heard his name there, and he could be an interesting guy as we approach the combine. Then kind of like the combine happened, and now we're in this like weird, you know, we're in this like 2-month phase where nothing's happening, and now everybody's like double like and triple thinking everything, and you know, just trying to spew out stuff just to say things. And I feel like Royals has kind of now slipped back under the radar to where you can find him here in the early to maybe even the mid third. And I think that he is an extremely quality wide receiver in this range, you know, kind of like a Khalil Shakir was like a couple years ago. Like he was like a highly graded guy in my like modeling system a couple years ago, fell to the 5th round. Then we didn't really hear from him for like a year or so. And now, you know, Khalil Shakir is a top like 30, 35 dynasty wide receiver, is potentially the wide receiver 1 for Buffalo. Like I think Royals could follow in a very kind of similar career trajectory, especially if he does kind of fall a little bit in the NFL draft, even into day 3. But if he is a day 2 pick, I think that he's going to be a guy that I wouldn't be shocked is more of a mid to late second, as opposed to this 3rd round ADP that we're seeing him in right now, as we're all just kind of letting him fall back through the cracks a little bit.
And that's where I have him in my rankings is pretty much mid to late second. Like I think I would 100% agree with you. I think it's just a guy that's fallen a little bit because it isn't a flashy game. Analytically, if you put it into a model, like he's not going to pop because he had a poor senior year due to the injury. So I do think, and it's a guy that doesn't have a flashy play style. So it just doesn't really suit him to be a riser at this point. You know, people are more so. You also have a class that's very weak to begin with. So people are just kind of latching on to, like you said, just kind of whatever they like. And that's kind of who's pushing it up. And Jalen Royals, probably, I could see him being a non-loved player amongst the consensus. His game doesn't scream consensus love to me. So I get it. I think that's where he's falling. And I think this is really good value. And I think you could potentially see him here I just think the running backs will probably get pushed up once it really matters and people start to make selections.
Right.
They won't take as many risks as mock drafts that are driving the ADP at the moment.
Now, 3.08, you've taken Egbuka, you've taken Jaylin Noel. Again, we're getting a little bit deeper here into kind of dart throw territory, claim your guy kind of territory. So where are we looking at here at the 3.08, Jeremy?
Yeah, for me, I am going to go a little bit with the claim your guy. I mean, in a big tier here at this point, much like you said, where positional value kind of can be played with a little bit. I don't need to necessarily go best player available here. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, as that's how some people like to draft. But later in this draft, you can kind of play with that as your tiers get larger. And I'm going to go with a guy that I think is being overlooked. I've seen some positive hype here in the last few weeks on X, but Damien Martinez out of Miami really has gone overshadowed by that passing attack in Cam Ward this past season, but he's coming off his second straight 1,000-yard rushing season. Now, he did only have 1,002, but he got there. So did have 1,000 yards again. He's had no less than 900 in his collegiate career in a season. He's also had over 7 touchdowns every single season and 10 this past season, which was his career high. He kind of burst onto the scene at Oregon State as a freshman, continued his ascension, and then came over to Miami amongst the realignment at the collegiate levels. So I do think it was a little bit of a disappointment. I expected a little bit more from him in Miami, but again, Cam Ward in that passing attack was electric, and that was part of the reason. He only saw 159 attempts, which was down 40 from the season prior, and produced only, 100 less yards than that. So still a very productive season for him. He is a physical type of runner. He is not going to shy away from contact by any means. He is a little bit lighter than most people were hoping for. He did weigh in a little bit less there, coming in at 5'11", just under 220-ish type of pounds in there. He said he's played around that size, although he was listed heavier in some places. This is kind of, he mentioned, I saw someone say that in an interview at the Combine, this is kind of where he's always been. He's never played much more than what he weighed in at. So that's a good sign because we've seen that physicality and that pushing power from him at that size. So don't expect him to get much bigger at the NFL level. He has a frame to do it. He is slightly upright of type of a runner once he's in the open field, but he does do well as far as getting the pad level down at the point of contact, which is good for a guy that does lean on his physicality. He's not necessarily making many people miss in the open field, but he's shown it at times a little bit. He's very good at finding the correct lanes. He's kind of a slasher, that one cut and get downfield type of runner, which mends well to multiple styles of running and blocking schemes, which you kind of need where he's going to get drafted. He's going to need that positional versatility because more teams will be looking at him. If you get a guy that really lives in that zone type of scheme, you're limited as a NFL franchise. You're not going to draft a guy that's a gap runner to try and be like, well, I'm going to make him fit the zone scheme. It just doesn't work. They'll see them draft players that fit their blocking schemes. Martinez can kind of do both. I think the outside zone will be a little bit of a struggle. He's not the fastest and quickest player in that lateral type of movements, but when he gets going north and south, he does have a little bit of a burst in speed and pad level through the holes. So I do really like him. He does show enough passing upside to be an NFL pass catcher. He's not going to be Aaron Jones or Alvin Kamara, but enough to play all 3 downs if he can improve his blocking. It's the typical, collegiate running backs just don't know how to block. I mean, that's typically how it goes. They're not used that way at the collegiate level. It's get the ball into your best playmaker's hands. So they're not having them block on 3rd down more times than not because the running back usually tends to be one of their better players. So we'll have to improve there. But he does enjoy contact, so I can see where he could. Really an ideal fit would be kind of that early down type of committee player that can find his role in like the Tony Pollards, the Brian Robinsons we saw here the past few seasons of good viability, kind of a red zone type of guy. But he could develop into maybe Ramondre Stevenson. He's a little lighter than Stevenson, but still give you enough if he's given a 3-down workload. He can catch the ball well enough to be a very viable high-end running back.
You and Matt are very much in lockstep. I had Matt on just earlier for like the first episode of this kind of series. He drafted Noel the 204, Royals at the 304, and then Martinez, I think, was his 3.10 pick. So you guys are pretty much in lockstep in terms of these kind of, mid to later round rookies so far. And I think that is something that I'm at least taking note of. Because
I should have switched it up.
I mean, hey, if you keep saying all these names, I'm this channel is going to look really smart if they end up hitting for sure, because I got you guys coming on here propping up all these players. But I know I really like Damien Martinez as well. He's one of the guys that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. I have a list of players that if they end up being drafted like early on day 3 and they hit a certain threshold, kind of like in my modeling, like they are. Nothing's ever a 100%, but like that's a pretty good area to be on historically, at least in terms of like what I'm looking at analytically. Martinez is already, in that range. He just needs the draft capital and kind of the situation to be put in the right place to succeed at the NFL level, whether that's as a handcuff or a guy that, can be a 2-down grinder, so to speak, that can grow into something more. I love that a lot. And I think that there are definitely enough landing spots in the NFL for him to find that right landing spot, whether it is, early on as more of a handcuff for maybe half of year, first, rookie year, but then grows into something a lot more. Or maybe he just Tyrone Tracy's a backfield and that's just kind of it, All right, moving on. 4.02, last 2 picks here for this kind of mock draft, 1 on each pick. So, at the 4.02, again, this is really kind of dart throw territory. Sleeper ADP may or may not be a little funky, and you guys will notice that tight ends and quarterbacks are really coming off the board. That's a sleeper algorithm thing. They force every team to, fill out the roster with one of every single position. I can't really help that, but I still think that we can talk about who some of these kind of later round guys are and that we're looking at as we head into the NFL draft. So, Jeremy, to round out this second overall team, what are we looking at here at the 4.02?
Yeah, a player that's probably not going to be here for you, but I will take Jayden Higgins. I can't let him fall much further. He's a bigger receiver out of Iowa State, 6'4", 216. Topped 1,000 yards this past season, 900 the prior season. Had 2 seasons with over 9 touchdowns. One came in 2022 at Eastern Kentucky, and then the 9 came in Iowa State this past season. So he is a transfer that started his career at a lesser of competition there at Eastern Kentucky, but did manage to have that 1,000-yard season this past season, and really the 900 at Iowa State the year before for a team that doesn't throw the ball a ton. They have obviously improved that a little bit over the past few seasons, but the volume has been there for him. He has kind of operated as more of a Z receiver, as wild as that sounds. We saw a lot of him playing in the slot. He's also played on the outside. I think that there can be some worry about his actual separation abilities and his skill set as a route runner goes. The Z position, you saw it was kind of almost like the Jonathan Mingo treatment, but not to the extent that Ole Miss had to do with Mingo to get him open. But the Z position lends him to get some more off coverage and really attack players' leverage points, which is what he's best at. It's almost like a Jordan Addison-esque type of move where he can kind of attack at the stem and then break off and kind of play off of whichever leverage point the DB chooses. If he can get him to spin his hips outside, he can cut inside, and it's easy pickings for him and his quarterback. The issue that I have is I do think that he struggles on those hard breaking in routes or hard breaking out routes. I don't think that he has the flexibility and ability to really do that well. And I think at the NFL level that will be exposed. He is a pretty good zone beater, though. He does understand that concept of the zones and kind of where to sit and find those soft spots when plays break down, especially when in the scramble drill type of territory. We saw him pretty good there for Iowa State. Now, the question that I would have, though, is, again, that he could just use an overall refinement. And I don't know if his athleticism really screams X that we care about for fantasy. Like, I do think he could be an X receiver. Maybe he becomes Nico Collins. So it will really depend on landing spot. So he doesn't offer much after to catch either. So that's a little bit of that like Nico Collins. Like Collins does offer some. So I like that similarity of their games coming out as far as Nico Collins and say Jayden Higgins. I also like it kind of like Alec Pierce, Cortland Sutton. He can be a field stretcher at times when he's asked to kind of run go routes or a little bit of like a double move type of thing. He can get open, but I do worry about some of the ball tracking abilities down the field as well. We see some where he kind of is just doesn't find the ball, which is concerning a little bit. So there's plenty of room for improvement for Jayden Higgins, but I do think that at this point you can't let him fall much further. And really, depending on the spot, he could go much higher in your fantasy drafts come May.
This is your first differentiation, at least in this later half, from Matt. Matt did not draft Jayden Higgins at all. He and the CPU let Higgins fall undrafted in this mock draft a week ago, much to the dismay of a lot of YouTube commenters saying that it's idiotic to let Jayden Higgins fall this far, let alone let him go undrafted. But I think Matt A wanted to highlight some other players because it does seem like Jayden Higgins probably won't be here just in the 4th round. This is like a sleeper ADP thing. But hey, if you draft online on sleeper and you like Jayden Higgins, maybe it means that you can wait a round later than you possibly think, just if people are following the ADP list. He's buried a little bit. So Matt wanted to highlight some other people that are probably more deserving of this kind of range. But he also, I think, noted a lot of very similar things as you did. It is very similar in terms of why he prefers Noel instead of Jayden Higgins, even though Higgins came in and had more yards than Noel in 2023. They're very comparable in yards. Last year, I think they both were over 1,100, but they were separated by 11 yards, and Higgins had one extra touchdown than Noel last year on 7 more receptions. But I think that it's a NFL translation thing. The NFL seems to be trending more towards a Noel type of fit than a Higgins type of fit as this big kind of X receiver who maybe doesn't have the best athleticism, not necessarily the best route runner, or maybe his size and athleticism kind of inhibits him from being that. But like you said, maybe he can grow into it. But I do think it is interesting that both you and Matt, even though Matt didn't draft Higgins, noted very similar reasons for why you like Noel so much more and why you might be a little bit concerned about Higgins at the NFL level.
Yeah, I just think those unathletic X type of players, not that he's unathletic by any means, but like the not superior freakish athletes that play X, like just don't develop a ton of fantasy value anymore. Because we talked about it with Noel and some of the other like quick separators, like that's kind of the way the game's going. Get the ball out of the quarterback hands, limit the threat of the quarterback as well as the pass rush. So his game doesn't really translate to that. So it's just more of a wider variance in what he could be.
All right, Jeremy, let's finish this thing off. 4.08, massive dart throw territory at this point, but you took Egbuka, you took Noel, you took Damien Martinez in the 3rd. To finalize this draft slot and to finalize this mock draft, where are we looking at in this spot?
Yeah, outside of Damien Martinez, I've taken too many receivers at this point. So we got to avoid that position. Although names that are ideal for me that I like in this spot is Ricky White's one, Pat Bryant, Torrey Horton, who went after this pick, Jack Besh, Kyron Lacey still, if he avoids all the legal issues, Nick Nash. Like there's a lot of still good receivers at this point to keep an eye on depending on some landing spots. And then the running backs are just loaded. So I'm going to go and dip into the running back position, but you have your pick of a gauntlet of potential true NFL players here at this point. I'm going to go with one that has fallen off of the radar for a lot of it, and that is Raheim Sanders. At one point, Raheim Sanders was the name in this class. Just short-lived, not too many seasons ago at the collegiate level, where he put up over 1,400 rushing yards in the SEC for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and went ahead and added himself 271 yards through the air that season as well. So for me, I do enjoy some Raheim Sanders. We saw him fall off with some injury issues at Arkansas, and he ultimately transferred to South Carolina this past season, put up 800 yards, which is pretty respectable on 183 attempts, but had 11 touchdowns. That nose for the end zone was still there and set a career high with 316 receiving yards. So we saw a lot of love here for Raheim Sanders at South Carolina. Big-bodied guy, 6'2", over 230 pounds, and he runs viciously. He's a very good player as far as attacking the game north and south. He really gets himself going quickly. He's very true to be a gap type of runner, maybe some interior zone, but really just kind of get him moving and get him kind of working his way downfield. And he's going to probably run over some defenders. Now that does come with a lack of kind of quick lateral movements. We don't really see a ton of that. We also don't see a very good re-acceleration. He can make a guy miss maybe laterally, but then he just doesn't really have the re-get up speed that you'd love out of him in the second level. So there is obviously those concerns as far as that goes. And as far as the receiving side, he was good, obviously setting that career high, but it's a guy that wasn't asked to run a lot. It was kind of like the dump offs, the little screens, stuff like that, where he can use his vision, just get the ball in his hands, kind of get moving downfield. When you got a 230-pound guy running downfield, the DBs have a little bit of struggle making those types of tackles. We see that with Derrick Henry on the regular. Now, he's not going to be Derrick Henry by any means, but similarities to maybe James Conner, Najee Harris maybe is his high-end ceiling, that running back 2 type of territory if he finds the right spot. Worst case scenario, maybe Gus Edwards is a guy that's a similar player in a way. Sanders is a little bit more athletic as far as the speed goes for him. As opposed to Gus Edwards, but still a little bit younger, was really off of that injury in 2023, which is kind of thrown him off the board. And then South Carolina, although they have some exciting prospects, wasn't like the most fun to watch football team in 2024. So I feel like the eyes just haven't really been on him, and he's just getting lost in a sea of what is a very good running back class. And I think this late, it's a guy that has the size and build and the skill set to be a 3-down back. So we talked about it earlier as far as potential 200 plus touch players, right spot, right situation. Raheim Sanders could walk into one of those potentially, getting drafted a little bit later. Maybe he earns himself a role and could have some upside. And like you said, we're in extreme dart territory. And for me, I tend to lean to running backs at this point, unless or feel really strongly about like the Puka Nacua or the Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, St. Brown went earlier in rookie drafts, but like those late round guys that really you have a strong lean towards, then maybe I'm taking a receiver. But I tend to go to running backs here just because it's more likely they see that opportunity. It's just a more injury prone type of position and more opportunities open up. And the 4-8, if I get, 4 games as a starter in the San Francisco offense, like Isaac Guerrero, like that's a win for me, at least at this position. Although you would hope that you get Puka Nacua. It's not going to happen on the regularity here in the 4th round. So I'll take a couple games out of a running back if that's the best I can scenario in the 4th round.
I take running back every place I can in this 3rd and 4th round for that exact reason. It is crazy to see how far, Rocket has kind of fallen. Like you said, like he was like the poster child of the 2025 class. It was him and Quinshon Judkins after what they did as freshmen. It was like, dude, you need to get these guys.
I still love Quinshon Judkins. And that's what's wild, though. As much as I love Ashton Genty, like people have to remember, like Ashton Genty wasn't really thought of in this class. Like it's almost like it took like Quinshon Judkins, Rocket Sanders, and even Travion Henderson waiting to declare. Like that's what kind of pushed some of these players up. So like it is wild to think. And obviously time is everything. And we see this regularly through the collegiate game. You see come in as a freshman and explode and then just disappear. Like it happens, but it is wild that how far he's fallen to now the point where you're getting him as like the 8th or 9th running back.